Productive Dentist Academy podcast network.
Doctor, have you ever felt frustrated with your CPA? I know I hear it a lot. I also hear that dentists get overwhelmed by surprise tax bills, or business owners in general just get hit with them. Or perhaps you're just unsure how to manage your cash flow like a true business owner. If so, this episode is for you. Today, I am joined by Chris Sands, co-founder of Profi 2020, a firm that is redefining what dentists should expect from financial advisors. Jump in with me as Chris shares behind-the-scenes story of how he launched Profi 2020, some of the top financial red flags dentists face and you may be facing too, and he provides practical behavioral approaches to achieving true financial health in your practice. Let's jump in. Welcome to Everyday Practices Dental Podcast. I am your host, Reagan Robertson, here with a wonderful individual, which might seem counterintuitive at first. Chris Sands is a co-founder and partner of Profi 2020 Dental CPAs. And if you are familiar with the consulting world, dental consulting specifically, I hear every year at the end of the year, clients will say, our CPAs told us to cut consulting. They just see it as a line item. They don't understand it. Yeah. So get rid of them and, you'll save a couple thousand, few $1,000s a month, whatever it is. And so you might be asking, why would Chris Sands and Profi 2020 want to partner with PDA? And you have been coming to our PDA conferences. We work closely together, with clients, and it's really exciting when a bit of synergy comes together. So I thought I would invite you onto the podcast and teach our listeners about what sets you apart from other CPAs and why we enjoy working together so much with our clients who we jointly adore, I think. So welcome, Chris, to Everyday Practices Dental Podcast.
Thank you, Reagan. I am super thrilled to join you. Excited to be here. I get to watch all of your other fantastic, exciting podcasts. I was like, when's my turn? So I'm so glad you've invited me to join.
This is so, and I love that you're in the new year too. So if you're not watching on video, everybody, Chris is coming from it looks like a news desk. And it's not a little home office anymore. You've really expanded your visuals, I would say. And I've always loved your message. So tell listeners a little bit about yourself and Profi 2020. Tell me about the services you provide, and most importantly, the problems that you're solving right now.
Yeah, so this is our new studio that we've launched here in our headquarters office. Profi 2020 is located physically headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, but we serve close to 680 dental practices in 43 states at the moment. I would say, you asked the question, what makes us different, or what is Profi? Profi was really, it was not created for dentists. It was really after an experiment, after me having worked in a dental practice through frustration and firing a dental CPA every year for 3 years. Couldn't find in the marketplace what I felt like we needed as the entrepreneurial, for the practice owner that I was working with, and decided to build it.
Wow. What were some of those frustrations that you were experiencing in the practice when you were engaging with different CPAs?
Well, frustration number one, and kind of the first pillar that we created when we started this firm, was not receiving financials timely. So I think we all believe like innately that we're going to sign up and work with a bookkeeper, an accountant, a CPA, tax advisor, and that we're going to get those financials on a regular basis, and we're going to maybe have discussions around them. That's what we all want. That's what we all need, I think, but it's not what you get out there in most cases. So
I was going to say, I walked a doctor a few years ago. It was, she was in actual tears, and so she was crumpled in a corner it was an event out of state, I think. And anyway, she said that she got her financial statements once a quarter printed out, and she was so embarrassed. It was like in a manila folder. She was so embarrassed. She just put it in a filing cabinet and didn't even look at it. And she just felt like, and she was producing over 2 a year and couldn't figure out where the heck it was going. Did not have anything at the end of the day. So I hear you with frustration number one. Okay, what was your other frustrations you were personally experiencing during this exploratory time in your life?
Well, on that frustration number one, we made it a pillar. It was a company guarantee that we have that we deliver financials to all of our clients by the 15th of the following month, or they're free. Okay, so I think that should be a demand of any practice, and really, and I would say that for serious accounting, I have this saying that accounting doesn't matter really
Mhm.
until it matters. And when it matters is when there's going to be a significant exchange of money. And that can be when you sell your business, that can be, or you're bringing on an associate or partner. That can be when you're asking for financing. But the highest frequency is every year when you file and pay taxes. The accounting is what basically creates the tax return and helps you see the tax picture. And that doesn't really matter if you don't have a huge tax liability. So for smaller practices, serious accounting may not be that important. I would tell you that in my experience, really after you get over a million, but maybe even 1.5 million is a point where I would demand monthly financials because your tax burden is being created, each and every month. It's a compound effect.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first pillar. The second pillar problem that I wanted to solve was after I did receive the financials, I requested a phone call to have them explain to me. And I asked questions to get some business advice. What could I change in this business and this practice
Right.
to grow it? And I found a few things. Number one was that we were working with dental CPAs who worked with a lot of dental practices, but they just did the accounting for a lot of dental practices. I was working in the dental practice on the practice management side, and we weren't speaking the same language. They couldn't give me any advice of what to actually go and change in the business. Um, and that's the piece I think also everybody wants. They want to think they're working with a business advisor that can help them make some changes in the business, but do they know dentistry? Okay, specifically. So they may just be targeting dentistry as the one niche market, and that is valuable. I mean, I really think of anybody who's in that niche market, and I think of our company more than just an accounting company. I think of it like a data company. Like,
Yes.
how can we use that data across multiple practices to see what the more successful ones are doing, what they're using? It's easy to see what vendors you use, what marketing companies, what coaches and consultants. Um, but then you really have to get into, okay, are you spending enough in marketing? This is just an example. Are you spending
Mhm.
enough marketing? How many new patients a month are you getting? Do you know the metric for that? And if you're not, are you listening to your phones, how your phones are being answered? The accountants I used to work with would have never thought
I was
of
going to say those are high-end strategy questions, and it's starting to put context like in a way that I haven't heard it before, Chris. That makes sense. That bridges the gap for me from someone looking at it from a traditional CPA standpoint when you put it like that. Like it's just a line item. Like they don't maybe take I don't know if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they weren't bridging that gap between this is what you're spending money on, what is the return you're getting for this particular investment, or where are your benchmarks in marketing, for example. Sounds like they weren't asking those questions that would lead to high-end strategy consultation.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So basically what we've kind of formed is, we have a little over 40 total accountants in our firm. And I won't tell you that they all know the business of dentistry, but we have the ones who are advisors, client facing. It's my job to teach them kind of the business of dentistry. It's my job to teach them some of those metrics. It's my job we meet as a team every week and talk about our clients. And when they're about to have a coaching call with a client to go over their financials and a metric is out of whack, I have to teach them kind of the symptoms so that we see the financials,
Yes.
but I have to teach them what possible causes in the business of dentistry are creating those symptoms. And we have to get the doctor, the owner, to go back and investigate those causes and come back to us with their findings. And sometimes we're recommending a change. So you mentioned quarterly financials. I do believe at a certain size you have to have monthly financials, but I think you need to have minimum quarterly calls
Mhm.
with the accountant. Some people want monthly calls, but they can't get enough done. They can't affect enough change in 1 month
Sure.
time.
Yeah. So you were I love how you were being your own hero, essentially, which some of the best companies ever are created by having that frustration and saying, I'm gonna go in and I'm going to solve for this. So how many years has Profi been in business? And in addition to that particular problem, what other exciting opportunities has Profi been able to find and help doctors with?
Well, so my personal experience starting working in a dental practice began in 2010. We did not found Profi until 2017.
So you had a good chunk of time to get real frustrated.
What I mean, it kind of came to a head where it's like, you know what, we've been beating our heads against the wall for a long time. There doesn't seem to be this solution in the marketplace. It was not offered. I saw it as a void, and we figured, you know what, let's go out and build it ourselves.
That's phenomenal. PDA, we have several different, alliance partner that work in the financial space in one way or another. So we have dentist advisors, which gives financial advisory. We have Howard Polanski with Financially Led. He looks at debt reduction specifically, and we have you. We have Profi 2020. So from an explain it like I'm 5 years old sort of standpoint, how I know you're familiar with all the entities here. How does it all work together to serve? Because we're, at PDA, if you've ever been to a PDA conference listening, you would know we're all about optimizing your practice. And when we say, I think it's cheesy, but when we say work smarter, not harder, it's really understanding from a fundamental standpoint how to run your business and then how to communicate with your patients so that you can do that dentistry that you have put so much of your own effort and time into. And that means looking at finances from different perspective points. It's not one company fits all. Each one does something a little bit different. So can you, from your perspective, kind of talk to us about that?
Let's say, in one word, the thing that should link us together in working with any kind of coaching company like yours, that's different from working with a lot of other accounting firms, that word is growth. It's one of our core values. I have found that many accountants are not growth oriented, both for themselves in their business and in the advice that they give. So accountants they want to be loved, and they think that one of
They
the
do. They want to be loved. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
I think, well, dentists wanna be loved as well.
Sure.
Okay, it's one of those hard professions where, they don't get a lot of love out there in dentistry or in accounting,
True.
um, but they feel one of the ways that they feel loved or they think that they're bringing good advice to someone is to, if their job is to help you be more profitable, they're looking at what expenses can they cost, and
Yeah.
we have this kind of funny saying, and this applies both to accountants and dentists, is that they tend to know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. Um, and so they look at every line item that is reported on a profit and loss statement is reported as an expense. So they look at them all as expenses, but some of those things are investments. They bring a return. And two things that are on that expense report that can be great investments are your marketing and your growth consulting, your coaching. And accountants can be very adversarial to those two things. It was certainly the advice that we received was, why don't you spend less in marketing? Uh,
Mhm.
Typical dental CPA and the industry average, I hate averages because I don't want to be average. I don't want to work with average people. They will tell you these industry averages, and in private practice, you should be doing 2% or less into marketing. Meanwhile, the DSOs are reinvesting 6 to 8% of their revenues into marketing. They don't have as
Aren't
great
we shifting that now? Is that the new numbers in? That's fascinating.
that's been around for a while and
Yeah.
continues to be the case because they have a revolving back door. They don't have the retention that private practice.
Sure.
But, private practices are not inviting enough people to the party. So we're trying to get any practice we work with to be in that, 3 to 5% of revenue reinvestment. And there's a lot more that's tied to why that number is what it is. But the second piece is I tell every business owner, hopefully you have enough margin that you can leave 10% of your margin, 10% of your total revenue as profit, as margin in your business for marketing, hiring, and training.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. Keep going.
Right. So, but these are small business owners. They
Mhm.
sometimes use the business like their own personal piggy bank, or they're their own boss. They're still just doing all the dentistry. Any money that they do make, they're taking it all out of the business, almost sucking it dry, funding their own lifestyle. And they're not thinking of it as an asset to reinvest in and to grow and to clinically, hire to clinically duplicate themselves, to scale this, to make it something that's really sellable and a business instead of a practice, because a practice requires you to be there, a business does not. So I think people have to go through that kind of evolution themselves to get to a point where they want freedom, and they decide, okay, I really need to get beyond just me being the one in the chair producing. A coaching component is one of the things I believe, because coaching, training is necessary. They spend a lot of time training clinically, the doctors, maybe their assistants, doing clinical CE, but they don't spend enough time training the non-clinical team, which is the gatekeeper, that starts the whole process, and maybe on the backside collects all the money. So anyway, the accountants can be very quick to say, "Hey, I've got a couple ideas to, help you be more profitable. It looks like you're doing well. Let's cut back on some of the marketing." And wow, I can't believe you spend so much with that coaching. What are you really getting? And you have to look at the growth. And I'll tie it all together, your question. There are plenty of coaches, there are plenty of CPAs, and they don't work very well together. They're actually trying to fire each other in many cases. They're adversarial. And as on the coaching side for you guys, like a PDA, you have to have some sort of financial proof to validate what you've done. And this has been my experience in working with dental clients over the years. Is you can install something that dramatically and financially changes their business, their financial life, their outcome with taxes, and they will not give you credit for it, or they'll give it to you credit for it when you first do it, then they will assume the credit for it. And it's always what have you got for me now? What have you done for me lately? What's the next thing? And if you don't have the next thing, they want to move on. And they think that they've created it, they've got it in place, and then they'll just, cut it out. They'll stop it. It's weird. As human beings, we tend to, once something works, we tend to quit it. It's very strange. Like once something starts working, you tend to quit it.
I say going back to the fundamentals, but you're right. What popped to my head was growth-minded discipline. And discipline and consistency is very sexy, but it is very mundane. So you have to almost shift your perspective. I know Bruce and Victoria were really great in my early education at PDA, helping me think from a growth mindset, meaning say top line production, and then a bottom line team, as I would say, that's your risk mitigation. And so it can be a natural place of oil and water if they don't have a strong relationship and an understanding, because your risk mitigators are going to do exactly that. They're just going to look at cuts, and it's a shame. It is a shame, and I think it is very unjust to have anyone looking at finances and not putting any story, because you know very well that the numbers do tell a story, and you're going under the surface and asking the question why. And it makes sense to me, because your core value being growth is going to give way to say there should be times when you do make the investment, when you do calculate the value, and you should take risks, and seeing that entire picture is part of that process. So if a doctor is to come to Profi, what does that process look like over the first few months? Like what does Profi go in and help the doctor understand?
So first, we actually do a review of the last 3 years of history to talk about where you've come from, to ask, so we see the hard data, the financials, to tell us a story, but then we ask the story behind that. What has contributed either to your growth or your decline, and why did the profit change? Then the next step is the accounting is kind of like the hygiene to tax. So you got to come through and get a cleaning first. You got to clean up the account, get a nice clean X-ray and put it into a dental chart of accounts, and talk about, what might be off, what are some of the levers that we can pull in the business that will offset another lever, and have that show up financially.
Do you need a deep cleaning? How bad does it how deep do we go here? Yeah.
The majority of what we do, so what we call onboarding is like the hygiene process. We have to, anytime we pick up somebody's finances, or we pick up their accounting leading to their tax returns, kind of like the same as when a dentist touches a tooth. No matter what's been done or who did the work on that tooth before you touching it, as soon as you touch it, you assume the liability of it. And so same for us. So no matter what time of year that we take over a new client, we have to go through the accounting all the way back to January 1st and make sure that it's accurate, it's correct. And at the same time, we've got to start downloading transactions and coding and keeping the file current whenever we pick it up. So our onboarding, we'd say we like to have it be 60 days or less. That's dependent on how clean it currently is. It's dependent on how engaged, involved, and responsive and communication the doctor is. But if it's a huge mess, and there's a lot of it out there in dental.
So no
It's a
judgment. So we listen, but we don't judge.
guys, it's not
It's okay if it's a mess. That's
an awareness. I think it's more of it's not judgmental, but there's a lot of it's a big mess out there in the dental world in terms of looking at business financials. And if sometimes they need an SRP and it can take, 90 days or more. So every case is unique. It just depends.
I think, and fear comes from the unknown. So I love the tie between a dental visit and a financial visit to it. It can be scary. It can be something like the woman that threw the financials into her filing cabinet and just didn't want to look. And that to me is the biggest disservice that you can do. So having someone that's been there, that understands the frustration, that can hold you through that process. I mean, where are the doctors, that come to you? Say, pick one in your head, maybe your favorite train wreck of all that came to you and you thought, I don't know how we're going to get through this. And you were able to do that. What were some of the behaviors and some of the key characteristics that you saw popping up throughout that story for them?
Well, what creates a huge mess is actually the management of cash flow and how, and especially if there are multiple locations, um, and having a clean paper trail from one entity to another. So once you're a business owner and you kind of have control over all of this, it becomes the wild, wild west. You have all kinds of online bank accounts, maybe for multiple different practices, and you need to pay for things, and you'll pull money from wherever you have it. And so they will pull money from
Oh.
different practices, take it over to the others.
Mhm.
What they don't necessarily realize is that each entity has a tax calculation, something called a tax basis, that can be affected when you do that. So every time a dollar needs to go to one of the other companies, it traditionally needs to either come home to the owner first and then they personally deposit it into the other company, or they need to have like a management company that they can push money up to. But there's this crazy intercompany movement of cash, which is causing a lot of tax issues for these entities. So they can't always depreciate equipment if they've messed up their tax basis. They can't always take distributions in an S corp if they've messed up their tax basis. And that's something I found was rarely, if ever, almost never discussed by the CPAs to these dental business owners, because they felt like they either couldn't understand it or it didn't really
Mm.
matter. And they would sweep things under the rug. They would do some journal entries. There's this, I would say, this terrible problem in dentistry that a lot of them don't know, is they have a loan to shareholder balance. Okay, and this is getting a little bit too technical here, but
No, go down in the weeds.
yeah, so there's this, in accounting, you can't technically have a negative tax basis, but you can kind of journal it over there as it's a loan. Okay, so the business owner either took out too much money beyond their tax basis, which they're supposed to normally have to pay like a extra capital gains tax on, extra
Mhm.
20%. The CPAs, again, wanting to be loved, they don't want to deliver that bad news at the end of the year. They don't want to
Right.
explain. So they just do this journal entry to something called loan to shareholder. And that's something that can affect you in the future when you sell your business. It's also a trigger for audit. Um, but it is so common in dentistry. I would say that if I meet a doctor that's in their 50s or older, and I just look at their tax returns that for their practice, there's probably an 80% likelihood they have a loan to shareholder balance, and I see them anywhere from 3 to 400,000 range. And I mentioned the audit risk. I mean, if they get selected for audit, the IRS will overturn that and say it's all wages, and you have to pay us ordinary income taxes, penalties, and interest. So
But that's a huge area of where there's ignorance in this, and I have a philosophy question for you also. I would love for you to be my eyes and ears on most of the dentists that you serve with that. So if the CPA is putting that in there, maybe that makes the CPA tell a good story, but that does give implications that are they even aware of that?
I would say 8 or 9 times out of 10 when we do consults and we reveal that to someone, they've never talked about it before. They don't understand what it is. They've never heard of it.
See, I would be so unbelievably frustrated. And so my next question for you in this is around philosophy. So I am not a finance major of any state ever. I follow the most, I would say the basic profit first. Donald Miller's Cash Flow Made Simple, Dave Ramsey, very, very fundamentally basic way of looking at accounts and separating them out. What is the philosophy that you see is pervasive, that accounts for things like this that people just don't know until nobody wants to be hit with that, when they're going over, oh, I owe this much in taxes. That's the worst feeling ever. And then how do you prevent that? So kind of what is the philosophy that you see? And is there any shift occurring? Or, I believe you're being that shift as well and providing a different solution.
Well, our name Profi has multiple different meanings, but the foundational was a play on the word prophy. It is
Oh,
preventive.
I didn't even think about that. Of course.
So
So
it is
cheesy.
preventative care and high frequency, of visits or care will lead to better overall financial health
Brilliant.
business. And, just like you need to go to the dentist at least twice a year, you need to meet with your CPA at least twice a year. But we want you to, the hygiene to be performed on your books very regularly, and being educated on how the tax picture gets generated proactively. We live by the 40% tax rule. I can do tax planning with anyone. If I have their financials from their business, I can pretty much do tax planning with anyone, and I'm not an accountant, not a CPA, just living by the 40% tax rule. And so, first question or first thing to educate on, the big surprise, everybody feels like they get a tax surprise at the end of the year.
Mhm.
It's only a surprise if you weren't meeting about it and discussing, how is it being generated and what's it gonna be. Maybe some people think they're gonna pay 0 taxes every year. That's not the case. But the way that it's not a surprise is that you owe 40% tax on 2 things out of your business. If you're in a business like an S corp where you can take a salary, you owe tax on that salary. That's likely been withheld through the payroll, and we typically don't have to worry about that. But for every other business, you owe tax on the profit, whether you take it home or not. And so that profit is at the bottom of that P&L, and that P&L, that profit and loss statement, is what is page 1 of the tax return.
Mhm.
It's not this mythical thing about how your tax gets generated. And if you over prepare by living by the 40% tax rule, a lot of what we do in preventatively getting away from those tax surprises which, create cash flow problems. The way that we actually solve for that is not through accounting. Accounting gives us the data, but it's through cash flow management, some of what you described. So we're a profit first certified firm. I wholeheartedly believe in that philosophy. I've expanded it beyond just the 5 main accounts and beyond moving percentages into something we call daily transfers. For a single location practice, we use about 9 bank accounts. That sounds crazy when you get started. You tell that to your banker, they're going to look at you like you have a third eye. But they're all very purposeful and intentional, and it organizes the money. It's like flossing your finances daily, okay, so that the financial bacteria of expenses don't cause any financial decay in your business, like requiring you to take out debt or for you to owe taxes and be behind. But a big part of what we do, major big part of what we do is education. Okay, so educating and how does it get generated? Then you can talk about some of the possible things you can do to, mitigate or lower your taxes.
So that was one of the beautiful questions you kinda asked as an assessment tool for those of you, that are listening. I can tell you in my own personal finances over my professional career, simplifying to that. And it does sound crazy at first to have multiple bank accounts for multiple reasons, but if you, when you talk about muddying where you're applying, where you're paying things, especially with the explosion of small group practices. So it's not the DSOs that have 600 practices under the belt. There's a lot that have 2, 3, 4, 5 practices, and I can see from your stories just how easy that can get confusing so fast. And in areas of our life when we talk about working smarter, not harder, it's about being able to contextually shift quickly. So follow me here. So if you have bank accounts that are diversified, they have specific purposes for them, you don't have to think so hard. You know what's going to go where and what's allocated to where. So one question you just asked me in my health assessment from a practice standpoint would be, am I prepared? Like, it's the end of the year. Did I prepare several times? Did I meet with my CPAs and I'm not going to have a surprise? So question number one, I'm not going to be surprised. What other questions do you think doctors should be asking themselves? And if that answer is no, perhaps they're not as prepared as they think they should be.
Hmm. Well, the meeting with the CPA, yes, is a key part. The movement of the money and the cash on a high frequency, preferably daily basis, that creates a mindset each and every day as you go into the business. Um, the way that you think about how you withhold those taxes, I think, is important. So there should definitely be a tax account in the business, and you should pay your taxes to the IRS out of that account in your business. That's one thing that, one way the CPA can actually see that you made those payments. I think that's a missing piece. A lot of people take all this money home. The CPA cannot see what you have in your personal accounts.
Oh, right.
And so they might make a payment from their personal account. They have to notify the CPA and give them some sort of transaction, documentation. But a lot of times they forget, or the CPA will ask, "Hey, remember I told you to make those quarterly payments? Did you make them?" They'll say, "Yeah, yeah, I made them." When they didn't,
Oh, no.
they will submit the tax return showing or assuming that they made that payment. The IRS doesn't have any receipt of that payment. The finger gets pointed back to the CPA. "Oh, you messed up." And so there's, in best practices and how to get the most out of your accounting relationship and not have those kind of mistakes. Filter the tax. So no gross money, no pre-tax money should ever hit your personal bank account. So if you take $10,000 out of the business, filter 40% tax, $4,000 into the tax account in your business, and only take $6,000 home to save, spend, invest, do whatever you want. That other $4,000 in the tax account, you would do that process every month for 3 months and just let it accumulate. And then you could empty the tax account to the IRS. And you can do that the first 3 quarters of the year. I actually am playing a game against the CPAs. I'm trying to beat them. Clients sometimes overpay in their taxes the first 3 quarters by just behaviorally making sure they're withholding 40% of every, distribution they take. Empty that account, even if the amount the CPA said to pay was less. In the fourth quarter, if we do that, whatever's in your tax account in the fourth quarter, you're likely going to owe a less of a last payment, or possibly nothing, depending on how your year turned out. And you get to take all that tax money home as a nice little surprise, bonus.
I was gonna go back to the over preparing because I love this. As somebody myself who I love to spend, right? Love to spend. That over preparing, you can make this game fun. Your future self will 100% thank you. It helps you with that behavioral mindset shift. So if you just set your rule in your head, I'm just going to contribute this much to this account and I'm going to do it consistently. I'm not going to wait. And I over prepare. You get a delight at the end of the year, and you're tired at the end of the year. You want to have time with holiday family. You don't want to be stressed out. That is one of the best ways, I think, to be excited and thankful. And boy, you will love your CPA for that too. I know that when I over prepare, I'm so delighted and happy. Nobody ever wants to get hit with, oops, I owe a ton of money ever. So it's a really nice way to sort of force yourself, I think, and shift your mindset.
A good coaching relationship and a good accounting relationship are really what we're talking about here today, Reagan, which are we're in the same business.
Yeah.
You might do practice management, dental coaching. We might do accounting, but the true business we're in is human behavior modification, and it's financial behavior modification. That's actually the key. So it's not just finding the right coach, just finding the right accounting relationship is not the full gig. I mean, it really does take you as a person, you as the doctor owner, not
Mhm.
only listening and implementing some of what you're taught, but it's a consistent, redundant, behavior that changes your outcome. So
So
that's
So let's talk this. I agree. All I can think of is the donut story. You put the donut on the table and you walk away. Who's going to eat it and who's going to wait the appropriate time? Like that, get that, pull out that dopamine, and that's the piece of that too. I think of everything in dopamine hits. How do we stimulate that primal brain? Talk to us a little bit about why you come to the PDA conference and what it is about the dentists that come to PDA events that you've worked with over the years. What's exciting to you about that, and what makes you come back year after year?
well, I'll go back to that core value of growth. I just there's a saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. And if our business isn't growing, I know that I kind of get depressed. I'm like, that's where I live. I live in the future and the goal setting. And I think it takes a certain level, maybe a certain experience level, before any small business owner, particularly in dentistry, though, decides that to take on, you know, take it by the reins and really say, okay, I want to grow this thing.
Mhm.
And of the general dentists, four of them are associates, and they can't see their schedule. Or if you ask them, hey, are you scheduled every day to your number next week, or do you know how much production you have on your books next week? They don't have ownership of that yet. It's not a muscle that they've learned how to train.
Oh, yes. If you take a visual, I I I thank you. If you take a visual of a hub and a spoke, okay? And so at the end of the spoke, it represents a level 10. That's your expertise level. And I want you to cut it up into 8 different ways, right? So you got this wheel, and this wheel's circle hasn't been drawn yet. Down in the middle towards the hub, that's where you're least experienced. When I look at so many doctors, they are so passionate about dentistry itself that they're clinical you can put way up on the board, right? Depending on how many years and how many advanced courses you take. But let's say put that at an 8. And then you look at the other elements of the business itself. So you put communication with patients and you write in where you're at from 1 to 10. The business elements of it, the financial accounting, the insurance, the administration, the hygiene, and you start to draw in, okay, I know from 1 to 10, this is where I sit. Typically, you have a pretty chunky wheel that's not going to get you very far. And I think you've done a really beautiful example of explaining how you help educate and guide dentists so that they can fill out those other pieces of the wheel, and why PDA and Profi 2020 work so well together, because we have the understanding that it is behavioral modification, and it is doing that with the mindset that your future self will be so much less stressed. I have to write marketing copy all the time, and I always say decrease stress. How? To me, this is how. Going in with no blinders on, having a clear picture with somebody who can say, "I've been there in your shoes. I got super frustrated in a dental practice, and that's exactly why I created this organization to help you, increase your proficiency."
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's beyond just doctor growth. It's to be a better entrepreneur, and business ownership is not a right or an entitlement. You're very fortunate if you get to you own one, and the question is, what are you going to do with it? It can be an asset that you can grow and is worth something, but it has to be that you want to grow beyond just being your own boss, and not just beyond just your own production. Because I am in the pursuit, I think, like many people, of this buzzword of financial freedom, and it first begins in your business, or changing it, again, from a practice which requires you to be there to a business which does not. And not everybody's at that level of mindset yet. And I think it takes a little bit of time. And so we're the best fit. And, if we're in alignment, if I'm in pursuit of that and the people I'm working with are in pursuit of that, we're in the best fit. And I look for, where do those people go for their information? And PDA is one of the great places I've found, and actually, we get to look under the hood, right, of all the
Mhm.
practices that you work with, and I'll give a shout out that I see practices of all different kinds and working with different coaches. The practices working with PDA by far are the most profitable.
Mm.
Okay. Um, and they still, each one has different things that they have to work on, but by and large, they're the most profitable. And I think that begins with, again, learning how to schedule to the number that's kind of y'all's introductory point that I've seen with Dr. Baird is just a game changer.
Um, Dr. Lippian said it best. I think I've mentioned it in another podcast episode. He gave us a 5-star review on Google, and he said, I held off for so long. I'm just paraphrasing, but it was basically the sentiment of it was I held off because I just thought it was, faster fillings and working harder. And it is the complete opposite of that. And I think there's always the two sides of the coin. Being profitable is great. You have to have a thriving future and to feel great. But when you can do that and provide better patient care along the way and care for your team, you just are winning across the board. And I do think that that's rare. And I think it takes intention. I think it takes business owners you are right. Growth mindset's probably what you would put on paper, but there is just a deep sense of servant leadership to not just the community, but to themselves and creating that longevity. It's gorgeous. And I'm thrilled. I too, when I hear associates, I hold my breath. Doctors as individual contributors, they can actually end up growing really, really well in their own practice. And then they make that switch and say, okay, I'm ready now. And I always want to hold their hand. I'm going to say, let me hold my hand, your hand while I tell you this. When you do that, you are transferring knowledge. And then that's the other side of the piece. So your puzzle gets more complex, but when you surround yourself with the right guidance, it can be a less painful experience, and it can give you great results. Philosophy alignment is so important. And doctor, if you're listening right now, thinking about the external groups that you work with, philosophy alignment is really, really important. We can't say it enough. So if you are growth minded and want to decrease your stress by being prepared financially in a way that can be fun and sexy and rewarding, I promise you, reaching out to Chris is also a great option. How can people get in touch with you and your organization?
You can check us out online at profi2020.com, profi2020.com, and you can find us on all forms of social media at profi2020.
And are you going to announce, are you kicking off a new podcast? Are you ready to announce that publicly?
Not quite ready to announce it, but I will say yes, we are kicking off a new podcast here in 2025, one that we're revamping from several years ago. With a new name, new brand, and new concept. And I will be inviting you back, Reagan, to
Awesome. Excellent. Well, I look forward to that. We'll keep an eye on it and announce it when it goes live. Thank you for your time today, Chris.
Thank you, Reagan. Thanks so much.
Doctor, whether you're leading a single location practice or growing a small group, the insights Chris shared today offers a refreshing and often overlooked approach to financial leadership. If you want to learn more, head over to profi2020.com or follow Profi2020 on your favorite social media platform. And of course, if you love this episode, it would mean so much to us if you would hit subscribe, share it with your dental colleagues, and leave us a review. We appreciate you being part of our Everyday Practices community.